This has been an unnatural summer, a disastrous season right across Australia. Bushfires have destroyed millions of hectares of forest, farms and houses have gone up in flames, and of course in the ACT, 4 people died. In the face of such devastation, such loss of life, people have every right to ask why. Even though bushfires are a fact of life in Australia, you can understand that people will go looking for someone to blame. And around Canberra, up in the high country, at the moment it's the Greenies and the National Parks authorities who are in the firing line. The devastation goes on forever. We're flying over an area larger than many countries. 2.5 million hectares blackened and charred. Up to 70% of the Kosciuszko National Park has been consumed in a summer of fire that burned across hundreds of kilometres. From some of our most remote and untrammelled wilderness all the way to the leafy suburbs of the nation's capital. Well, I can only see to the mountains there and the hills there. I mean, how extensive is this destruction?
Well, you can go 40 kilometres in that direction and 90 kilometres in that direction and you'll see the same sort of devastation you'll see here. You won't see all Mount Nash. But
after a great fire, an eerie silence descends on the forest. It makes me think of those black and white photos of the battlefields of World War I.
It simply resembles a napalm strike or a B-52 strike to me. But
in this lifeless place, it's a silence only broken by angry voices claiming that this destruction need not have happened.
This has been the greatest single loss of native wildlife in the history of Australia. There's nothing compares with it. It's just been devastation. For sure. It is. It's the largest bushfire we've had in Australia, and the whole of the mountains have been annihilated by these fires.
Now, amazingly, you say that all this was preventable.
It was predicted and it was preventable.
Peter Cochrane is a 5th-generation Snowy Mountain man. When Banjo Patterson wrote The Man from Snowy River in the 1890s, the Cochranes had already been here for 30 years. And they're still in the same patch of ground on the edge of the national park. Strongly opinionated, as you'd expect from people with a century-and-a-half tenure on this land. Inevitably, we will start looking for someone to blame. Who cups the blame for this?
I don't think there's any doubt that the blame lies squarely at the feet of the Green influence in politics in Australia. And governments of all ilk simply don't have the courage to commit themselves to manage the environment in a way which is sustainable and prevent fires such as this occurring by taking on sensible management practices.
It's all happened before. Over vast reaches of time, this is an all too familiar Australian scenario. Bush that hasn't burned for 50 years is tinder dry and just waiting to explode. All that's needed is a spark. And so continues the ancient, awesome cycle of Australia burning.
Up there with the best of the worst of them. Yes, it is. I think
no one knows more about bushfires on a global scale, nor has written more about them than American author and academic Dr. Stephen Pine. And he says what all big fires have in common the world over is that in their wake comes recrimination.
Fire triggers a lot of emotions and a lot of response and a lot of ideological responses. But we ought to remember that fire isn't listening. The fire doesn't feel our pain. It really doesn't care. It speaks a language of wind and fuel and drought and terrain. And unless you speak in that language, it's not hearing.
Well, paint me the horrendous big picture. What was it like?
Well, what happened was there was a lightning storm which started around over there in Victoria, wrapped around through Victoria, started a whole lot of fires down in that area, 40, 50 or more fires. It then came up through New South Wales, through Kosciuszko, and then just went north, and it went north as far as the ACT.
The man in the hot seat is New South Wales National Parks manager Tony Fleming. He is the nominal ruler of this vast inflammable realm more than half the size of Tasmania. Do you feel you're making excuses or that you have to make excuses?
No, I don't feel the need to make excuses. I mean, this is a reality that we're facing. We had one of the most serious underlying droughts that Australia's seen, and in this part of the world it's been very serious. The effect of that is to make an enormous amount of fuel available which wouldn't otherwise normally be available. We had 40-odd lightning strikes in one area, and in fact, if you think of Victoria and New South Wales, over 100 fires starting within a couple of hours. They are in all the worst locations that we'd seen fires historically in. So it's not a matter of making excuses. These are just the circumstances surrounding the fires that we were dealing with.
Fire is so much a part and parcel of the Australian landscape that often we fail to give it its due. So the fire can burn for weeks across millions of hectares of national park. It can flame across thousands of hectares of farmland until finally it roars in here, into the pine forests around Canberra. In what seems like seconds rather than minutes, this whole place explodes and the fire leaps the road into the suburbs, into the headlines and into history. Fire has come to town.
Constantine, this is a rare situation. We need some plumbers here urgently.
The wind was just so strong and the noise was deafening. And everything combining was just like one of those disaster movies.
Give me the grand tour.
Okay, well, we're not going through the front door here, we're going through the laundry door.
After the fireball descended in the suburb of Duffy, Rick Hingy was the last man to leave. Wasn't it pointless, indeed even foolish, to stay here?
I just had to make sure that all the neighbours were out of the area before I left, and there was nothing more I could do. I'd left it possibly too late as it was. I got myself singed on the way out.
What on earth is this?
Well, this is the remains of my Alfa Romeo GTV.
I think it's probably the alloy from the alloy wheels, the spare that was sitting in the boot of the car.
Melted and run out here onto the brickwork.
That's right.
Well, of course, people died. You stayed on. You must consider yourself to be a lucky man.
Yes, I do count myself as one of the lucky ones. I'm surprised that far more people didn't die.
There will be a coronial inquiry into the Canberra fire, but back in the high country, harsh judgments have already been made.
There's no doubt in the minds of all of those who live around this area that the fires in Canberra were caused by the National Parks and Wildlife Service in New South Wales and a poor management regime, and the same management regime exists across Australia.
Well, that's a hell of an accusation to make.
It's an accurate allegation. I mean, the fires started in New South Wales on the western side of the ACT, and they weren't attacked for several days, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service response was pathetic in the early stages. And it was that strategic decision that was made early not to attack the fires in the early stages, I believe, that caused the loss of lives and the loss of property in the ACT.
They say you have, well, blood on your hands.
Yeah, look, and that frustrates me because it's too early.
Only frustrates you?
Oh, look, it actually is making a lot of our people quite angry. There is no evidence which has been properly analysed at this stage to lead to that conclusion. And the experts are still trying to come to grips with it. They're saying it's an event the like of which they've virtually never seen before. So to be starting to attribute blame doesn't achieve anything.
In conditions perfect for the biggest fire, there was little the authorities could do but fight rearguard actions to save the mountain villages. Everything else fell to the flames. Can I hold on to him?
Sure.
He doesn't mind?
No, make sure you hold the tail.
Oh, he's lovely. Beautiful. The fire burned into places never before touched. It destroyed the high alpine habitat of creatures that may never have known fire, like this rare mountain pygmy possum, one of the most endangered species which park scientist Linda Broom has been working for years to save.
Because of the drought and because the conditions were so dry, it was really something that we couldn't prevent. It's like a cyclone or any other natural phenomenon and natural disaster.
The other people understandably look around and want someone to blame.
Yes, well, you can't, people don't blame cyclones or floods. Why blame fire?
But that fatalistic view is not shared here at the local Thank You barbecue for the Snowy Mountain firefighters. While the fires are now well and truly quenched, tempers remain inflamed. Old-timers like Bob Maguire and Tom Barry are very hot under the collar.
It was just a time bomb waiting to go, which it did. We didn't know when, but we knew it would.
And when you said that, what was the reaction?
There's no reaction from the authorities.
They don't want to know about it, and they don't want to know about it today. Most people think, oh, you're a grazier, you're a redneck, all you want to do is go in and graze cattle there and make money out of it. That's not true. We love that. That's our heritage. And, you know, to see the old stockyards that were built back in the 1800s, they've lasted until now, but they've been burnt. And the greenies in Sydney, the green zealots, as I call them, they will be happy to see those gone, because every time they can wipe out some sign of white man's inhabitation of the national park, they want it wiped out. And it's wiping out our heritage. It's killing something that we all love.
Long memories fuel the debate. Memories of the way things used to be done, when the mountain cattlemen would graze the bush and fire the country every year, reducing the build-up of scrub and bush litter. Fighting fire with fire.
It's extraordinary. It looks like the earth.
That's the way Peter Cochrane's forebears did it, he says, simply copying the Aborigines.
The Aboriginals burnt this area for 40,000 years before white settlement of this country, and to the history has not recorded any event as catastrophic as this one, particularly in regard to the wildlife. It's been an immense loss, in both in human terms and in terms of the loss of the environment. And no excuse from the National Parks and Wildlife Service or any politician will convince me or anybody in the mountains of anything else.
But management philosophies change, and for 10 years now, these mountain people say that they've been locked out of the national park in favour of a credo of more passive management of the land. A credo that they say now lies in ashes.
You know what they say, that you could have been reducing hazard, you could have done some kind of selective grazing, that there was much that you could have done that you didn't do.
It's not a matter of saying that we had everything wrong. What we had was a fire management arrangement which has been evolved over a long period of time, and in the presence of these fires has proved very successful in protecting life and property.
Now, I come down on the side of people who say we need to do more burning. If you're serious about managing fire in these large bushlands that are adapted to fire in some ways, then that's what you need to do.
It's going to go against the grain for a lot of us to accept people going into national parks and deliberately setting fires.
Well, I think that's the charge before you. I mean, if you don't do it, nature's going to do it for you.
In the Australian eucalypt forest, fire is a creator as well as a destroyer. Most of our trees have evolved with fire and are well adapted to it. The bush is genetically primed to burn. The human argument is whether to let it burn or whether to somehow interfere and break the ancient cycle of fire.
Is this going to happen again?
It's going to happen again. Not only will it happen again in the Kosciuszko National Park, but it'll also happen in other parks across the various states in Australia which are managed under the same regime. The practices and the principles exist in all of the national parks under the same green philosophies, and they failed.
It'd be bloody nice if we didn't have to make choices. Well, the fact is there is no neutral position on fire. We are accountable for making those choices because the fires that do come in may not be the fires you really want or that this landscape needs.
And as you say, fire's not listening anyway.
It really, really doesn't care. It will just absorb all those words. It's just so much more vapor to be sucked into the firestorm.
Hello, I'm Liz Hayes. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.